Mutants are already gifted with amazing abilities that put them a cut above regular old humans like you and me. But then there are those mutants who get not one, but 2 mutations, giving them even more and more power, as if they needed it. The Blob, or Frederick Dukes, is one of those characters. Now, I really didn't give the Blob enough credit when I was growing up, and he can actually do some pretty cool things, and some things that didn't even occur to me. His actual main mutant ability, for example, is that he can essentially become immovable by creating a monodirectional increase of gravity beneath him that extends about 5 feet in radius from his center of balance. But what's even cooler is that, with some training, Blob was able to manipulate his gravitational aura outwards in order to trigger a localized implosion. Also, the Blob is incredibly durable. The fat on the Blob is able to absorb the impact of rifle bullets, cannonballs, bazookas, and even torpedoes. He has been able to survive being hit by a meteorite that was 50 feet in diameter moving at terminal velocity, but that's not all. Blob is also able to manipulate his body, basically shapeshifting to a degree. After undergoing the Mother Vine enhancement process, Blob developed a secondary mutation, liquid form. Now, not actually, but his secondary mutation allowed him to stretch his body to a great extent, and the problem is the mutation was hard to control, so when he first ever manifested it, he stretched himself too far and basically turned into a puddle. Next up is Gambit, and Gambit has the really cool mutant ability of molecular acceleration, allowing him to convert the potential energy of a non-living object through touch and kinetically excite the molecules to the point that they explode. Usually when a mutant has an ability that manipulates molecules, they have a pretty vast array of powers, but for Gambit, he mainly just uses his abilities as attacks, charging up his signature playing cards and bow staff and other objects like that. We have seen him reach the full potential of his power, only this was an alternate reality version of the guy. He could manipulate kinetic energy down to a molecular level, which basically made him a god. But as you may have guessed, Gambit has a second mutation. After a traumatic event left him blind, a secondary mutation kicked in that allowed Gambit to be clairvoyant. Gambit's ability did not give him the power to consciously look into the future. Instead, his secondary mutation acted like a warning system, kinda like the spider sense. He could sense danger and react to it. Now, fortunately for him, Gambit got his sight back not long after losing it, meaning he stopped needing to rely on this secondary mutation, but he does still totally have it. Daken, or as he's going by now, Akihiro, possesses a lot of the same abilities as his father Wolverine. He has a crazy healing factor, superhuman senses, and of course, bone claws. But what some people may not be aware of is the one mutation he possesses that neither his father nor his sister / clone possesses. That power would be pheromone control. Daken has empathic ferrokinetic abilities that allow him to use his pheromones to manipulate the emotional state and sensory perception of others. He has used this ability to instill intense fear, happiness, depression, fascination, and a false sense of security in others. The false sense of security one is probably the most interesting, as it's allowed him to sneak up on others without them even worrying that he could be there. He also has used this ability to alter others' depth perception and vision, making them fight sluggishly. He can also control his own pheromones to make him basically untrackable, even to someone like Wolverine. There are limits to Daken's ferrokinesis, but it's such a cool ability. If you have seen the movie Logan, then you'll recognize Caliban as the blind, seemingly albino mutant who hangs out with Logan and Professor X. In that movie, he displays Caliban's main ability, which is being able to detect mutants' X genes, usually within a 25-mile radius. Although, it's worth noting he has been able to detect particularly powerful mutants from further away before. But what I want to talk about is Caliban's other power that most people don't know. This is called his flight or fight response. Whenever Caliban feels stressed, he manifests 2 extra powers: super strength that can overpower Spider-Woman, and fear absorption. This second power allowed Caliban to absorb the psionic energy created in the fear from others and amplify it back into his environment, doing things like very quickly turning those nearby into a fear-induced panicked mob. This ability was boosted up by Apocalypse twice when Caliban served him as both death and pestilence.
Training with Doctor Strange made magic even more powerful. She already has all the knowledge imparted to her by Alternate Storm and of course Belasco and all his magical texts, so adding adding in the teaching of Doctor Strange has made her an insane level of powerful when it comes to her magical abilities. At one point she used her knowledge to turn herself and a group of other supers, including mutants and some Guardians of the Galaxy members, invisible. Yeah. And a Gambit to buy time when her teleportation powers just couldn't cut it. It's not really like a mutant power, but it is a power that a mutant has. So, see what I did there? There's something about people being in near-death experiences that seemingly allow them to evolve in some way and survive. Masque is another one of the mutants that has experienced that. Masque was inherently more of a villain in the comics and also a Morlock. However, being a Morlock wasn't what made him evil. What made him evil was kind of his outlook on life. His mutant powers allowed him to alter the appearance of others, basically turning him into one of the world's most powerful plastic surgeons of all time. But at the same time, Masque was considered himself to be hideous, hence why he hid in the underground tunnels of New York with the Morlocks and, was a Morlock, because that's kind of their whole thing. And his powers did not work on his own physical appearance, tragically. That is until he was nearly killed by Shatterstar. Now, to survive, he had to actually move his organs around, so this gave him the power to manipulate his appearance. He leveled up. He gained what we would call a secondary mutation. For a while, he also used his powers to appear as Marilyn Monroe while leading the Morlocks. Although now Masque has seemingly gotten over his obsession with beauty and usually chooses to just appear as he is. Either that or people forgot that this power existed, but I'm gonna go with the route of, Masque just loves himself now, because I like that story for him. Moira was usually known as more of an ally to the X-Men for many years, and none of us would have ever suspected that she had powers at all. She has been known as a mutant ally throughout many comics, often Charles Xavier's ill-fated lover, and if you don't see her as being a major player in the comics, let me just remind you that she was the one who figured out how to cure the legacy virus, and I honestly think that elevated her even to a superhero status if we're talking about it. We found out Moira McTaggert was a mutant recently in modern comics during the House of X series. We learned that she had done more than just die in the comics. We learned that her powers allowed her to actually be reborn, but not in a traditional sense of superpowers. This isn't a healing factor or resurrection. Her powers actually allow her to relive her life again. Yeah, so it's kind of like a reincarnation. From birth to death, starting in the womb. So she's living the same years, but she can use her actions to alter history, making her an odd but surprisingly powerful mutant. But not everyone knows about Moira McTaggert and her powers, so there you go. This is less of a power, this next one, and more of like just a really interesting fact about a power, but I didn't know this myself initially and I was surprised by it somewhat, so I figured I would just share it with you and count it as a point on this list. Now we all know that Jean is one of the preferred hosts, if not I would say the preferred host for the Phoenix Force, but did you know that the all-powerful cosmic entity was actually holding Jean back? Yeah, apparently that's right. Jean has stated before that she actually became aware after the Phoenix Force left her that it was actually causing her to hold back her abilities for fear of the Phoenix taking a hold of her and possessing her. So while many like to say that Jean has only ever been extremely powerful when she's merged with the Phoenix, like that's Jean at her most powerful, it turns out that it's probably just the opposite, because she literally fought to hold herself back, which honestly to me makes some sense. Saying Jean isn't actually powerful and that it's like all the Phoenix has always just felt like kind of a cop-out to me, considering that it's her own power and empathy that the Phoenix was seemingly attracted to in the first place. Like that's why she's the ideal host, so to me that makes sense. But that also means some crazy stuff. That means like Jean could destroy maybe the multiverse herself, you know what I mean? Because Phoenix can destroy planets, so. I always forget about Kid Omega's secondary mutation because it very rarely comes up in the comics, and I feel like it's also therefore a power that a lot of people are gonna forget. Now I usually probably forget about it because Quentin Quire no longer really finds it interesting. At least, that's the canon reason that we're given for why we really never see it anymore. I personally think it sounds super interesting, and I'm surprised that he's bored of it. However, this is Quentin, so maybe I shouldn't be so surprised. Quentin Quire is a bit of an oddball. He's often unimpressed as well by some of the coolest stuff. He's very like, ugh, whatever, I'm over it. Or at least, he presents himself this way often. Kid Omega's power that I'm about to talk about here is that he has a non-corporeal form, which when accessed also speeds up his consciousness and actually allows him as a telepath to reach out and connect with all sentient beings. Yeah, basically like all of Earth he could just connect with. He can think at the speed of light while in this form, but then again, even when Quire isn't in it, he's known for being one of the fastest thinkers and one of the smartest psionics on the planet, so I think we kept that part, but we forgot about the non-corporeal stuff. Devil Dinosaur comes from the prehistoric past of Earth 78411. Most people think of him as just a devil beast from Dinosaur World, and yeah, he is that, but did you know that he is also a mutant? Yep, his mutant gene activated after a traumatic experience with fire. Fortunately, he was saved from those who would harm him by Moon Boy, who befriended the beast. Devil Dinosaur's skin changed to red as a result of his mutation, making him a giant bright red dinosaur. Really stands out. Which honestly kinda makes me think of Clifford the Big Red Dog. I wonder if Clifford is also secretly a mutant with a secret mutation. He has like bright red fur. So strange. Devil Dinosaur was partnered with Moon Boy for quite some time until Moon Boy's death, wherein a new character was introduced to work alongside Devil Dinosaur, a girl with inhuman genes known as Lunella Lafayette, or Moon Girl. We love Lunella. I love DD too. He's also a really great card in Marvel Snap, by the way, especially if you pair him with Moon Girl. It's one of my favorite combos, even to this day. I don't know what's more frightening, the fact that Jean can basically manipulate people's dreams and nightmares through the villain Nightmare, or the threat she gave Nightmare after defeating him in the comics, where she threatened to destroy him at an atomic level. Yikes. Either way you slice it though, when it comes to nightmares that have been created by the god of nightmares himself, Jean is actually the one who would really call the shots between them when they're pitted against one another. I know you'd think Nightmare would come out on top here, but Jean is just that powerful. She could not only use him to take control of others' dreams the world over, but of course could also just take control of those dreams from Nightmare himself, and even match him, or really even beat him in his own realm, which is pretty wild. Chamber is a weird character, but also a beloved character. Like many weirdos that I love to talk about, Chamber is of course also a mutant. His name is Jonathan Starsmore, and while he may actually have the potential to be considered Omega level, that doesn't make his powers any less weird, thank goodness. His power relates to the fact that he's actually made of pure psionic energy. Now while many people know that Jono is psionic, because you know he's always talking telepathically, I don't think many folks actually think about like why his powers manifesting caused him to lose his jaw. I mean, I'm sure the hardcore Jono fans know all about this, but for those of you that are a casual Chamber fan, I'm gonna get into it. When his powers first manifested, they blew a massive hole in his chest and his face. While many people would be immensely harmed or even killed by such an occurrence, Chamber was not. As a result, Jono no longer needs to breathe, eat, or drink, and his blood does not even course through his veins. It doesn't need to do that to keep him alive. Yeah, as such he is typically seen with a scarf or some other clothing covering the lower half of his face, and he communicates telepathically, as you know, he can no longer talk since he has no jaw. Also he's made of psionic energy, so he's a very powerful psionic mutant. By far one of the strangest, yet kinda in a weird way most OP characters of all time from Marvel has to be Doop. Okay, so he's at the very least the most strange. And now we have his evil counterpart, Pryde in Excellent, who might somehow be weirder. Oh boy. Doop is pretty powerful because he has some fourth wall shattering level of awareness, and he's able to actually move between panels in comics, existing not just within the panels of the page, but also moving into the borders and margins as well, able to exist outside of the panels that we're used to reading, which I think is pretty wild. I mean, not many other characters can do that, never mind mutants. Granted, we don't really know what Doop is, or you know, if he's really a mutant, but he definitely hangs out with the X-Men a lot, and I feel like he's so weird, I just would believe he is a mutant in some way in his origin. Though at this point in time, there's no definitive origin for the character yet, just to be fully transparent here. He's also demonstrated some powerful magical abilities too, as well as super strength, speed, durability, and even the power to resurrect. Without the help of the Five no less, he can just do that by himself, so he's got a lot of powers that I feel like not a lot of people think about. The Love Eyes is one of my favorites. Never forget Madelyne Prior's awesome telekinetic lasso. What an awesome and totally bizarre weapon for a goblin queen to wield. Maybe we can call it a telekinetic whip instead. That seems more fitting based on Maddie's kinda generally crazy and definitely vicious and vengeful disposition. Madelyne Prior as the Goblin Queen used this lasso to wrangle, get this, Jean Grey. That's right, her lasso was powerful enough to wrangle Jean, who herself is considered, now at least, an Omega level mutant in both psionic areas of power. What's more, Maddie's psionic whip was so powerful, it also basically just rendered Jean powerless when they were having their fight. So yeah, I feel like if you can use any kind of lasso to render Jean Grey powerless, that's impressive. Why doesn't she use it more often? She should bring it back. I want to see the lasso again. Let's bring it back. Number 5. Multiple Man. Multiple Man has a strange and yet awesome power. He can create duplicates, often referred to as dupes for short, of himself, and use them to do and learn all sorts of things. Why learn? Well, because when he absorbs these duplicates back into himself, he also gains all their memories and knowledge, as long as he gets to absorb them back, that is. We've seen a lot of weird stories with Multiple Man because of this part of his unique power set, including one where he had a baby with his girlfriend Cypher, but because he had actually sent a dupe to sleep with her on the night the child was conceived, when he first went to hold their newborn child because it was actually a product of a dupe, it got absorbed back into him. Lots of weird things about that. Well, that whole scenario. And then there was the time that he secretly sent a dupe posing as him, I mean technically they're all him, but you know, they're not the real him, to hang out with Layla and their son together, Davy, when Davy took his first steps. This dupe tragically died during an attack on Madrox's lab in X-Corp, so he wasn't able to actually absorb him back, and therefore lost those memories forever. Ooh, sad, weird. Kinda awful, Jamie. I love when people are always like, man, Jamie, why are you always sending dupes to hang out with me? And Jamie's response is just like, I mean, technically the dupes are me, so you're just hanging out with me. Number 4. Crazy Jane. Crazy Jane is a member of the Doom Patrol, and honestly, that is a great team to look at if you want to find some superheroes who are actually quite powerful, but also just wonderfully weird. Jane is no exception to that rule. She's kind of like Marvel's Legion, who appeared only a few years before she made her debut over at DC Comics, first appearing in Doom Patrol issue 19 of the 1987 series, created by comic book writing legend Grant Morrison and masterful artist Richard Case. Crazy Jane is Kay Chalice, who within her has at least 64 personalities, each with their own personas and their own power sets. While this means she has a lot of power at her fingertips, the challenging thing is that Jane often struggles to find balance with the various personalities residing within her, and has demonstrated various levels of control over them, and they over her. Number 3. Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl is also one of the most ridiculous heroes when it comes to her premise and her power set. Although really what makes Squirrel Girl, aka Doreen Green, so strong of a hero, so powerful of a hero, and of a character, is her likability and her approach to heroism. She has a tendency to beat villains by befriending them and persuading them to stop their devilish and deadly plots. Although she has also summoned an army of squirrels in the past to help her take down even some of the most famous and notorious villains, like early on in her career when she handily and embarrassingly defeated Dr. Doom. Squirrel Girl has also faced off and defeated the likes of Thanos and Galactus as well. I love Doreen Green. I want to be Doreen Green. She's so great. Number 2. Metamorpho. Probably one of the strangest but also most powerful heroes out there is Metamorpho. Metamorpho made his first appearance back in 1965 in The Brave and the Bold issue 57, and has also been known as the Element Man in comics. He has a very unique and interesting power set that allows him to transform his body or parts of his body into any element. This also gives him a pretty unique look as well. Metamorpho isn't the only hero to exhibit these powers though. At one point we also had Element Girl, whose story ended up turning quite bleak in the end, I must say. She assisted Metamorpho on some of his adventures, and maybe if we do a part 2 I will tell you some more about her on that list. Number 1. Doop. By far the strangest, yet kinda in a weird way most OP characters of all time from Marvel has to be Doop. Okay, so he's at the very least the most strange, even if you don't agree that he's the most OP. And now we have his evil counterpart, Pryde, in Excellent. Oh boy. Doop is pretty powerful because he has some fourth wall shattering level of awareness and is able to actually move between panels in comics, existing not just within the page's panels, but also moving into the borders and margins of that page as well, which I think is pretty wild. He's also demonstrated some powerful magical abilities as well as super strength, speed, durability, and even the power to resurrect, without the help of the Five no less. Yeah, because Doop is also associated with mutants, even though I don't really really know if we've clarified if Doop is actually a mutant, but he's definitely mutant adjacent at least. Number 10, exceptional. Bailey Hoskins is known for being the worst X-Men ever, probably because his powers are pretty lackluster sounding, but managed to pack a pretty big bang when they do get used. Bailey's powers involve self-detonation, but the only thing is that activating his powers will actually also result in his death, meaning he can only use them once and doing so will kill him. However, he does end up doing this, and in doing so saves the world, or at least a world. His good friend and teammate Miranda has reality warping powers that are extremely powerful, propelling her into her own classification of mutant even, in terms of power level. But even then, this time around, it seems Miranda can't seem to interfere in this world at this time. It seems she needs some help from Bailey, and in sacrificing himself, he not only saves the world, but also seemingly helps Miranda to fix it and set it right again. Or potentially erase it. That's kind of what it looks like happens at the end. But maybe that's how you fix it. Just wipe it. Number 9, Funny Man. Funny Man is an odd superhero who is historically actually pretty significant, despite how weird he may seem. He's not just powerful for how much of a goofball he is powerful in a historical context, which I think means he deserves this spot. Also, I'm not sure if we've ever mentioned him on the channel. As far as I can recall, I haven't at the very least. Funny Man was a creation of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, after they both left DC and began what would become an epic and long-time legal dispute over the rights to Superman, not feeling they were being fairly paid their dues. And for those who don't know, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster are the ones that created Superman. Siegel especially was passionate about getting the rights to their character back. After leaving DC, they reconnected with former DC editor Vin Sullivan, who had started up his own comic book company, Magazine Enterprises. Jerry and Joe tried to create the magic of Superman again, but this time by teaming up to make something entirely different and new, Funny Man. Celebrating their love of comic book pranks and humor, Funny Man was comedian Larry Davis, who after a publicity stunt gone wrong, ends up actually catching a real-life criminal, and decides to become a bona fide superhero, using his jokes and funny pranks to apprehend and stop criminals. A wacky idea that sadly did not end up panning out in the end for Jerry and Joe, as the character only lasted 6 issues. Funny Man didn't have any powers, but he was miraculously and comically good at stopping villains with his antics, and sometimes even doing this completely by accident. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show your love for our channel on perhaps another platform, you can head on over to Facebook, click that like, it really does help us out here at the channel, and thanks if you've already done it. Number 8, Dead Girl. I think one of the weirdest things about Dead Girl is that her whole thing is immortality, as she's already dead and basically can't die, with her mutant powers activating only after her death. And yet she did die in the comics, possibly due to a disease which ultimately caused her to fall apart from decomposition. That is the one thing she's meant to be good at, not dying, and yet it happened. Because she's technically already dead. Fortunately, that didn't stop Dead Girl from going on adventures, and she currently still is doing so, even despite dying. Joining the newly reformed Static X as they battle against Zeitgeist Team Excellent. Dead Girl's power allows her to reanimate herself, parts of herself, and to communicate with ghosts and even temporarily resurrect the dead. Number 7, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur make for a great pair, especially as Moon Girl's power set allows her to swap her consciousness with Devil Dinosaur's consciousness. An oddly specific but super powerful ability. Moon Girl, aka Lunella Lafayette, actually has inhuman lineage and gained her abilities after undergoing Terrigenesis. Aside from that, she is also a super genius, and despite her young age, is likely one of the most brilliant and gifted minds that we have in the Marvel Universe. Also, when we're talking about weird power sets and weird heroes who are also super powerful, Moon Girl really fits the bill, as even outside of being a superhero, she's identified as a kind of oddball her entire life. In fact, she was super nervous about undergoing Terrigenesis because of this. Although she has embraced her weirdness, she was worried that this would just be another thing that would make her stand out more and turn her into even more of a freak than she already was. Aw, Lunella. I identify a lot with Moon Girl. I feel like she's such a cool and underrated character. Number 6, Elasti-Woman. Elasti-Woman. I love Rita Farr. She is one of the members of DC's Doom Patrol. In the show Doom Patrol, Rita might struggle to utilize and control her powers, still afraid of them and of her appearance while using them, as well as becoming, permanently stuck in her kind of creepy elastic form that she has in the show. But in the comics, Elasti-Woman has learned to master her abilities. Rita gained her powers while she, as a Hollywood actress was working on a set in Africa. She was exposed to volcanic gas, which allowed her to change the size of her body and limbs at will, also having the ability to stretch her limbs. John Byrne's interpretation of the character was also able to alter the size of objects just by touching them. And the current Prime Earth continuity version of her also has shapeshifting abilities. I also feel like DC's Doom Patrol series does a great job of capturing what like shapeshifting or stretching powers would be like in real life, and kind of the whole horror and body dysmorphia aspects of them. Possibly it's one of the best live action interpretations of this kind of power set I have ever seen. Also, if you aren't watching DC's Doom Patrol, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it. It's so good.
Sharon Ginsburg is like the Elle Woods and Batwoman of the Marvel Universe. Let me explain. She is a mutant, but her civilian job is being a lawyer. Lawyer by day, bat-winged mutant by night. Or whenever she needs her wings. She is made for flying, her bones are lighter, and she is smaller than the average person. Her wings are massive, like at least a 15-foot wingspan, but because this is Marvel and everything is possible, she can easily hide the wings. The wings are her whole identity in terms of mutanthood. So losing those wings, that's a lot of trauma and pain, and apparently the exact right amount to trigger a secondary mutation. Her secondary mutation brings in even more bat qualities. When her wings were roughly removed, she fell unconscious. Eventually waking up, she realized they were gone. She was so upset and angry, she manifested bat claws, and she went insane. She was captured in X-Statix 11, and we haven't seen her since. I hope she's doing well. Thanks to a secondary mutation, Havok can wreak havoc forever. But first, Alex Summers' talents include energy absorption, even from something like a star. Because of that bit with the star, he is definitely immune to extreme heat and radiation too. He shoots plasma blasts, usually from his arms. They can be used as a weapon or to even help him fly. So that's pretty much everything he had going on before the secondary mutation. His secondary mutation appeared in the Mutant X storyline. Alternate reality versions of Alex Summers got yanked together by a cosmic force, and we don't really learn that anything serious mutation-wise has happened until Alex passes away, then doesn't. He wakes up in a different timeline in a different version of himself. Now, he has the ability to shift his consciousness from one version of himself to the next. Can he die? Maybe. Being a host for the nexus of all realities is what caused this. You've heard of Mother Earth. Get ready for Nature Girl. She does go by a few names, and I was not prepared for one of them. Her civilian name is Lynn Lee, but her other mutant name is Armageddon Girl. That's a 180 from Nature Girl. It is fitting though, because she did do a 180. She started out as a hero. She attended the School for Gifted Youngsters, named the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning at the time. It had been established that she could control or influence nature and animals. Make birds carry her, plants fight for her, that kind of stuff. She goes off the rails and joins the bad guys. Bad for everyone else, but good for her because she discovers her secondary mutation. She not only has a connection to all things in nature and can influence them, she can draw power from them to make herself more powerful. The power she is drawing though is basically the thing's life force, so she usually ends up killing whatever it is that she's drawing from. Right around one of the last times we saw her in the X-Men Unlimited Infinity comic is when she started going by the name Armageddon Girl. Pietro and Wanda are probably the most, maybe, famous mutants, it's a whole thing with them, of the Marvel Universe, but there's another set of definitely mutant power twins that deserve some attention too. Northstar and Aurora. They are a beacon of light, literally. When they were babies, they were separated after a car crash killed their parents. While separated, they both learned of their mutant abilities on their own throughout their teenage years. Both twins are very fast. Northstar used this to become an Olympic champion. They can both fly, but their big trick only appears when they are together, so sweet. When they physically touch, they can generate a powerful, bright light. It can blind or simply just distract enemies. The secondary mutation manifests after a series of experiments requested by Aurora so that the twins can do the whole light thing without touching. It works, and now they both have a semi-new talent. Angelic X-Men Warren Worthington III was just a guy until he got his wings. Then he was a mutant with the ability to shockingly fly. The wings have other uses too, they are really strong, so he can use them to fight. Angel, unfortunately, got mixed up with Apocalypse, and Apocalypse planted a death seed in Warren. Warren becomes Archangel on his way to being the next Apocalypse, which is a very bad thing. He doesn't get there though, good news. What he does get is healing blood, kind of. Warren himself gets an accelerated healing factor, but if you were to get a blood transfusion from him, that blood is supercharged with the healing powers. We see this happen in Uncanny X-Men 420. I'll take a wild guess and say that he's got the universal blood type. He also got blue skin. He used to be just a guy. Look at him now. Jean Grey exists in a kind of gray area here. There's only so many secondary mutations out there, please be kind. Jean Grey has the Phoenix, but this ain't about them. This is about the time she lost her powers and then got them back. Miss Grey absorbed Psylocke's telepathy and lost her telekinesis, but not for long, she just got it back. And there wasn't an explanation, so Beast just made the connection that it must have been her secondary mutation, and he would know. Amanda gets into Beast's secondary mutation in part 1, go check it out if you haven't yet. Back to Jean. But what does the mutation that she gets mean for her and even other mutants? It potentially means she can restore her powers and come back from anything, and maybe even repower depowered X-Men. Of course, that's really up for debate, so let me know what you think down below. Cyberine, unfortunately, not a ship name for Cyclops and Wolverine, instead it's the name of the Wolverine version that killed Cyclops. Do I see an enemies to lovers plotline in the future? Wouldn't that be wild considering the whole Jean Grey thing? That is so not important. Anyway, so on Earth 517, that's the Marvel Contest of Champions Earth, Wolverine kills Cyclops. Hurting a friend to that extent is traumatic, and the psychological aftermath of it all caused Wolverine to experience a secondary mutation. This mutation allegedly was mimicking Cyclops' powers. So now we have a Wolverine with all his regular bells and whistles that also basically has laser eyes. New fear unlocked. Richard Gill of Earth 616 is better known as Wildside. He was a founding member of MLF, the Mutant Liberation Front. They are not good guys. His original mutation was hallucinations. He did this likely through telepathy, and he was pretty good at it. Unfortunately for him, he was depowered after M-Day. But hey, he survived, and that counts for something. He did eventually get his special talent back through the Mother Vine thing, plus a couple bonuses that made him an even bigger problem than before. They made his powers the same, but better. Instead of just hallucinations in the head, they were also kind of physical. As long as Wildside is conscious to keep it running, you're basically in a fever dream that feels super real and you can feel pain in. But if you knock him out, you're good. Black King, not to be confused with Black Tom from part 1, Black King is a billionaire genius energy absorption secondary mutanist. He develops a secondary mutation. That's the point. Sebastian Shaw's original special skill is the energy absorption thing. He can use the absorbed kinetic energy to make himself stronger, faster, and just basically enhance himself. This makes him hard to beat. Many heroes are known for their ability to pack a punch, so what do when the better the punch you give, the better the enemy gets? Mental stuff! The secondary mutation comes when Sebastian underwent the Mothervine enhancement process. The bonus he gets is that now he doesn't even need to get punched to absorb the kinetic energy. He can just absorb what's around him. Good for him, bad for everybody else. He also develops concussion blasts. The energy he absorbs can be like thrown at somebody. Wolverine's kiddo on Earth 1610 is taking after his dear old dad. James Jimmy Hudson Jr. has got the it factor, healing factor, and claws. First comes all that, and then comes the indestructible skeleton. His secondary mutation is that his skeleton gets coated in an organic metal. Wolverine famously has the Atom skeleton after going through a brutal, rough procedure, but his son, he just comes with it built in. It's what lets the kid have metal claws just like his dad. The metal trick can also make a pretty sturdy mouthguard. Unfortunately, Jimmy never knew his dad. Jimmy was adopted early in life, like newborn early, by Wolverine's friend James Hudson. But Jimmy did know the X-Men. Kitty Pryde was one of the first to meet him. She brought some of Wolverine's stuff and a hologram of Wolverine explaining to Jimmy that he was his son. She encouraged him to try out his mutations for the first time. Sabretooth doesn't just hate Wolverine, apparently. He hates the whole family tree because Sabretooth attacked little Jimmy too. Well, he was a teen at the time, so he wasn't that little. Some parents pass down family rings and some enemies for life. If you are trying to find Jimmy online, you might see the alias Poison attached to it. Well, one horrible day, the Poison Hive invaded Earth 1610. One invaded Jimmy. Long story short, most of the poisons end up eliminated, but lucky for Jimmy, not the one in him. That one dubs itself just poison and walks the earth in Jimmy's body. They are not on the same side at first, they are each fighting for control of the body, but eventually their physical form is threatened. They have to put aside their differences to survive and agree to work together to escape. Eventually they head off together to figure out how to co-inhabit one body, and all of this happened in the Ultimate Universe.
Sync developed a pretty powerful secondary mutation after he returned from the dead during the Krakoan era, so this is a recent one, so you might not know if you're not following with modern comics, or maybe you are and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the one I do know. His secondary mutation is more suspected, I would say, than confirmed. Well, we know he has this ability now, but we don't necessarily know if it is a secondary mutation or not. The ability in question is that he can now remain synced with other mutants even without being near them. I believe the idea is if he's synced with you once, he can kind of sync with you whenever, but of course there are some limits to this and we're still kind of figuring out how that works. I don't think that sync using those powers if you're not near him would be as powerful. However, this mutation also takes a toll on his body and it seems to age him faster every time he uses it. In addition to this, he can also sync with superpowered non-mutants as well, which is huge. As I said, the full extent of his newfound abilities has not been explored, and I don't know if everyone would consider them to be a secondary mutation, as they're still tied to the same power set, but I personally do. I believe secondary mutations can also manifest in a boost to a predetermined power set, and I think this should count. To me, it's a secondary mutation, so there you go. Take it or leave it. Cypher is another hero who went from being kinda lame to kind of insanely powerful thanks to his own secondary mutation. Honestly, I've become a pretty big Doug fan in recent years, now that I better understand just how powerful his power set can be. I think my love of Doug comes from me also realizing just as a person how important communication is in my everyday life, and how much I value being around other people who can communicate well, and also value my ability to communicate with them. When we can't understand each other, it actually creates big problems in our lives, and that's what I appreciate about Doug and his power set. His ability to communicate and through that resolve so many issues without even needing to come to blows. In terms of his mutation, we saw him go from a character who could just understand all languages and communicate with people in that way to someone who really understood the various minute types of languages around us that often go unnoticed, and thereby become a master of those types of languages as well. Things like technology, and even at one point physically fighting, which is a sort of physical communication or language and dance. This shift in his abilities happened after Doug died and was resurrected, and it honestly puts him on a whole other level, and really he's pretty powerful. I know sometimes we say, oh, communicating, is that powerful? Actually it is. I always forget about Kid Omega's secondary mutation because it just very rarely comes up in the comics anymore. Probably because Quentin Quire no longer finds it interesting, at least that's the canon reason that we were given for this. Though I personally think it sounds super interesting, and I am surprised that he is bored of it. However, this is Quentin, so maybe I shouldn't be so surprised. He is often unimpressed by some of the coolest stuff, or at least he presents himself this way often. Kid Omega's secondary mutation here is a non-corporeal form, which when accessed also speeds up his consciousness and allows him as a telepath to reach out and connect with all sentient beings. He can think at the speed of light while in this form, but then again, even when Quire isn't in it, he is known for being one of the fastest thinkers and one of the smartest psionics on the planet. Maybe that's why he was like, it's alright. I become like whatever, I don't have a physical form, but like, I'm pretty cool even when I have a physical form. Said to be the daughter of Unis the Untouchable, one of the earliest X-Men villains, Carmela's mutant power set is similar to her father's. However, at one point her powers evolved even beyond her own control. This seems to be a result of being exposed to Mother Vine, which triggered a secondary mutation in her. This mutation would cause her energy field to overcharge the more she used it, making it more devastating in terms of the damage it did to the people and technology around her. And if you aren't familiar with Unis the Untouchable, his main thing was that you couldn't touch him because he had a field around him that made it impossible to touch him. But this is also a field that blasts out in Carmela's case as well. What was worse, she had no control really over the power of her energy field, and she also suffered as a result thanks to overcharge resulting in a backlash. So when it happened, she would also be in pain as well. So she'd be causing pain to others and then also be like, ow. I mean, I know she's like a villain normally, but still, sucks, you know? That would suck, whether you're a villain or not. Something about people being in near-death experiences that seemingly allows them to evolve out of survival. Masque is another one of those mutants, and Masque was inherently more of a villain in the comics, and also a Morlock. However, being a Morlock Morlock wasn't what made him evil, because Morlocks are not inherently evil. What made him evil was his outlook on life. His mutant powers allowed him to alter the appearance of others, basically turning him into one of the world's most powerful plastic surgeons. But at the same time, Masque was considered himself to be hideous, hence why he hid in the underground tunnels of New York with the Morlocks and usually led them. And his powers did not work on his own physical appearance. That is, until he was killed by Shatterstar. To survive, he had to move his organs around, and this actually unlocked the power within him to manipulate his own appearance. For a while, he actually used his powers to appear as Marilyn Monroe, no I'm not kidding, while leading the Morlocks. Although now Masque has seemingly gotten over his obsession with beauty and chooses to mostly appear just as he is. A friendly reminder to love yourself, friends. Take a page out of Masque's book. Actually, at least I think that's what happened to him. I don't know, I haven't read every single Masque issue, so. But if there isn't a Masque issue where he realizes, you know what, maybe I should love myself as I am, there should be one. And if there isn't, Marvel, if you need someone to write it, I'll write it for you. Everyone knows Emma Frost's diamond form, but did you know this wasn't the first ever secondary mutation to even appear in the comics? What? This secondary mutation is an interesting one for me, as I didn't know about it myself. I've never been deep in the know when it comes to Elixir, so it was cool to find out that something I thought was just a core part of his standard mutation is actually perhaps secondary. For this point, we're talking about Elixir's physical mutation, the golden hue of his skin. This change occurred shortly after his first appearance. Only a few issues later, he actually uses his powers to heal himself and his skin changes to a golden color. So it seems to make sense that I wouldn't know this was even a secondary mutation, since most of his appearances have been with this look. Joshua Foley, aka Elixir's skin, also changes color when he uses his powers to harm others, changing from a golden hue to a deep metallic black color. The changing of his skin is not something that Elixir also seems to be able to control, but instead is a mutation that is closely tied to his primary healing and death touch abilities. If your skin changed color anytime you did anything, what would you definitely want it to be or not want it to be? While many heroes have secondary mutations, let's not forget that this whole idea in terms of when it was classified started with Emma Frost, who herself was once a famous villain. Likewise, there have been other villains who have also gained a secondary mutation, but who simply aren't as well known. Enter Black Tom Cassidy, a classic mutant villain, and if you aren't familiar with him, you should be. He's pretty cool. His secondary mutation has changed somewhat throughout his history. It's been described as giving him the upgraded ability to channel his bioblast through his fists, as opposed to needing wood to channel said blast, which is what he originally had, giving him his own plant form, and giving him the power to manipulate plants and wood around him. Like many others on our list, Black Tom actually got this sort of secondary mutation from being mortally wounded, but yeah, it's changed a lot throughout the years in terms of exactly how it works or what it does. It feels weird to include Beast also on this list, but when I think about most people I know who love the X-Men, they usually always think of Beast as being default blue. Now this is because most of the people I know grew up with the 90s or early 2000s Beast after he'd undergone his secondary mutation. Many fans out there still don't know that Beast's original power set was just that he was like super dexterous. He just looked like a guy. He had big feet, big hands, and he swung around a lot. Initially, Beast looked like this guy, but after being exposed to a serum he created, which isolates and boosts the X gene in mutants, he became permanently mutated again, gaining the secondary mutation of the blue fur. In fact, I think Beast may be the first mutant in comics to have developed a secondary mutation, before we even had a terminology for it at that time. He mutated. He's all covered in blue fur, which initially was actually like a gray fur, but that's a whole other story. That has to do with comics coloring and miscommunications and just how blues and blacks got often mixed up by people. With this next one, we're not talking about that time that Kitty Pryde was turned into a cat person in Wendigore, although that was a thing that happened. It was something though that she was given as opposed to an evolution of her mutant-based abilities, and it was temporary. With Kitty, or Kate, it's interesting as there are a few different instances where I feel one could argue that she manifested some kind of secondary mutation, or more specifically evolution of her powers. But this has also, I don't believe, ever fully been confirmed in the comics. Let me know if I missed something and if there is a page where someone says, this is a secondary mutation. I'd like to focus on the heightening of her powers over the years, which I believe is the version of a secondary mutation, as I understand what secondary mutations are, which can either be a significant power boost or it can be something additional. Some people, however, see secondary mutations as just something new and concrete added to a mutant's power set, like Emma Frost's diamond form, which exists separate from her telepathy, but it doesn't need to be that. And in fact, I think a major power boost does count, hence why I'm counting it. And if you don't agree, we can debate about it in the comments. Like when Kitty stopped needing to hold her breath while intangible, or when she was merged with the Black Vortex, becoming all-powerful, but then after giving up the Black Vortex's power, discovered that she had unlocked a new level of power through that, so after using it, it was kind of like an additional mutation. As I said, there are actually multiple moments for Kitty when I feel like this has happened, but those are the main ones that come to my mind. Speaking of folks who have seen major power boosts throughout the years, enter Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. Iceman has had a few different moments like Kitty Pryde where I would say his powers have evolved, and which could be considered a secondary mutation as he severely leveled up. When he learned he could manipulate his body into more than just ice or snow and learned to use his water form. When he learned he could just become straight up ice. That was a whole thing, because before he was, I believe, covered in it. When he healed back up after having his ice form shattered. And when he learned he could make ice clones. Honestly, Bobby's just had a lot of moments because he's super OP.
Sitting at our halfway point is Natsu Tsukishima, or Ultimate Cyclops. She is Earth 6160's reimagined version of Cyclops, a young Japanese girl whose mutant power is the ability to emit powerful concussive optic blasts from her left eye. Unlike the classic Cyclops, Natsu's blasts are limited to one eye, which she covers with an eye patch, and her powers are marked by unique drawbacks, such as her eye being harmed after using them. Natsu's upbringing mirrors that of her 616 counterpart Scott Summers. Natsu's powers have immense destructive potential, but her emotional turmoil and lack of control make her a wild card. As the new Cyclops, Natsu embodies both the legacy and the evolution of the X-Men mythos, representing a new generation of mutants whose choices could redefine the fate of their world. At number 4, we have a mutant that is completely lacking any sort of personality, but that is 100% not his fault: Blank Slate. Blank Slate is a metamorph, one that when they morph into someone, they don't just take on the appearance of the subject, but also their personality and memories. This has led to Blank Slate losing everything that made them unique and reverting to literally a blank slate devoid of any personality. The poor mutant is described to be in a perpetual existential crisis. Beast was a victim of Blank Slate's abilities, but decided to help the mutant learn who they truly are, guiding them through their journey and finding the support they need. Blank Slate's capacity for comprehensive mimicry positions them as a potentially daunting figure in the Marvel Universe, capable of infiltrating teams, bypassing psychic defenses, or even challenging established characters on their own terms. Looking ahead, Blank Slate's powers could have profound implications. They might serve as a tool for exploring themes of identity, agency, and the consequences of cloning or duplication. Their existence raises questions about what truly defines a person, biology, memory, or experience, and could be leveraged in future storylines to challenge or destabilize the status quo among mutants and other superpowered beings. Making the top 3, we have Sophia Yong, known by her codename Jitter. A groundbreaking Singaporean mutant and member of the Outliers, her mutant power, Hyper Focus, allows her to instantly acquire and master any skill or talent she sets her mind to, skills that would normally take years to develop. However, there is a catch. This mastery only lasts for 1 minute, after which she experiences an immediate crash, making her power both extraordinary and risky. To manage her ability, Sophia always carries a stopwatch, ensuring she never exceeds her time limit, while her powers make her incredibly versatile, capable of becoming a top martial artist, expert lockpicker, or even a linguistic prodigy in an instant. The short duration and the post-use crash mean she must act quickly and strategically, especially in high-stakes situations. Jitter's character also represents invisible disabilities. She has a stutter, and it is a big part of her character's journey, adding depth and relatability. Jitter stands out as a uniquely adaptable mutant whose powers could be pivotal in scenarios requiring rapid skill acquisition or creative problem solving. Her limitations, however, add tension and realism, ensuring she isn't overpowered but remains a compelling, resourceful member of the X-Men's new generation. Our runner-up is another member of the Outliers, Ransom. Ransom's mutant ability is both unique and alarming. He was born with a black hole in place of his heart. This allows him to absorb matter, energy, and even attacks directed at him, making him nearly impervious to conventional harm. Projectiles and blades only make him stronger. Ransom's abilities have already proven significant as he demonstrated enough raw power to take down Wolverine, a feat that highlights just how dangerous and potentially game-changing his presence could be among the X-Men. His existence opens up new narrative possibilities for the future of the Marvel Universe, as his powers could shift the balance in mutant conflicts and challenge even the most established heroes and villains. With his compelling backstory and immense abilities, Ransom is poised to become a pivotal figure in the evolving landscape of Marvel's mutant saga. An honorable mention before we get to today's top spot: Harvey X debuted in the same arc as the Outliers and stole hearts, but unfortunately passed after only one appearance. The young mutant was a super fan of the X-Men and helped out the team by healing Rogue's broken arm. Harvey's mutant ability extended past healing qualities. He was a telepath and could see visions of the future. This sweet mutant may have had a short run, but he left a lasting impact. And finally, taking our top spot today is none other than Maystorm from Earth 6160. As the deuteragonist of Ultimate X-Men's Japanese Resistance arc, Maystorm channels Storm's elemental mastery through a younger generation's lens. Inspired by and serving as a legacy character to the iconic Storm, Maystorm possesses powerful weather manipulation abilities, controlling wind, rain, and lightning much like her idol. In the rebooted Ultimate X-Men, Maystorm is not only a formidable mutant, but also emerges as a leader, credited with naming the X-Men in this universe and poised to guide a new generation of mutants against major threats such as the Shadow King and the Maker. Her role is especially significant given the absence of classic X-Men figures like Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey, positioning her at the forefront of mutant kind's rebirth on Earth 6160. With her compelling backstory, strong leadership qualities, and the potential to reach Omega-level power like Storm, Maystorm is primed to become a central figure in the Marvel Universe's future. There is even speculation that, like Miles Morales before her, she could eventually transcend her universe and join the main Marvel continuity, further cementing her legacy as a pivotal new hero. Kicking off our list today in spot 10 is Bronze. Trista Marshall, known as Bronze, is a newly introduced mutant in Marvel's exceptional X-Men, possessing the ability to alter the composition of her skin into a nearly adamantium-like metal, making her almost untouchable. In her metallic state, she can extend whip-thin cables from her body and even seems to possess a level of super strength. Her powers make her both a formidable combatant and a unique addition to the next generation of mutants, especially in the challenging post-Krakoa era, where young mutants face heightened negative public perception and social alienation. Bronze's encounter with Kitty Pryde, who steps in as a mentor after Trista is attacked for her mutant identity, positions her at the heart of a new wave of X-Men stories focused on trauma, resilience, and mentorship. With her versatile abilities and the emotional depth hinted at in her early appearances, Trista has significant potential to become a central figure in the future of the Marvel Universe, representing both the evolving nature of mutant powers and the ongoing struggle for acceptance in a world that fears difference. As Marvel continues to spotlight younger mutants with fresh perspectives and complex backgrounds, Bronze is poised to play a key role in shaping the next era of X-Men narratives. Our 9th spot was a quick fan favorite for her epic mode of transportation and fire-wielding abilities. Calico. Raised in isolation by wealthy, overprotective, and anti-mutant parents, Becca's only real companionship was her beloved horse, Ember. This traumatic upbringing not only shaped her personality, but also resulted in part of her mutant ability, a powerful psychic connection to Ember. Becca's powerful mental abilities can manifest physically, generating flaming armor around herself and even Ember, or transforming Ember into other horse forms. She is the final boss of Horse Girls. Despite her privileged appearance, Becca's story is one of overcoming tough life experiences and learning to embrace her mutant identity, evolving from denial to proudly declaring herself an X-Man. Her powers are visually and conceptually distinct, offering new storytelling opportunities, especially as her psychic bond with Ember is both a source of strength and a direct response to her isolation and abuse. Narratively, Becca's journey from sheltered victim to empowered mutant resonates with audiences and follows themes central to the X-Men mythos. She is part of a new team of mutants called the Outliers, a ragtag group brought together after they all found themselves targets of the same mutant hunting monster. But that's a video for another day. Spot 8 goes to another member of the Outliers, Death Dream. Introduced in X-Men Unlimited 126, this mutant is living in a ghost-like state and able to summon spirits. This spectral ability not only allows for intriguing storylines involving the supernatural and the afterlife, but also positions him as a potential bridge between the living and the dead within the Marvel Universe. Given Marvel's frequent exploration of alternate realities and mystical dimensions, Death Dream's powers could be pivotal in future story arcs that delve into the boundaries between life and death, or in conflicts where communication with spirits or navigating the afterlife is crucial. In addition to his story potential, the mutant will likely be an asset on the battlefield. He doesn't just summon souls, but also the energy they have, using this to fly or create tendrils to catch his prey. Aligning with his mutant abilities, Death Dream can bring himself back from the grave and is resistant to most poisons. He isn't going down unless he wants to. At number 7 is Alejandro Luna, known by his mutant codename Axo. Axo possesses the ability to detect and manipulate emotions, with his skin acting as a living mood ring that changes color to reflect the emotional states of those around him. This unique power allows him not only to sense, but also to influence the feelings of others, which could have significant implications for both interpersonal dynamics and broader conflicts within the Marvel Universe. Axo's abilities are still evolving, and he is beginning to experience new aspects of his powers that he does not fully understand, prompting him to seek guidance from established mutants like Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost. Given the potential for emotion manipulation, from calming hostile crowds to destabilizing enemies, Axo could become a pivotal figure in future mutant teams, offering both subtle and profound influence over events. We have to keep friends together. Next in spot 6 is Tao Tran, Melee. She possesses the powerful abilities of intangibility and invisibility, allowing her to phase through solid objects and remain unseen. Powers reminiscent of Kitty Pryde, one of her mentors. Notably, Melee is depicted as physically strong and eager to engage in combat, which adds a unique dimension to her defensive powers and hints at untapped offensive potential. With guidance from veteran X-Men like Emma Frost and Kitty Pryde, Melee is poised to develop her abilities beyond their current limits, potentially becoming a formidable force among the next generation of mutants, including her friends Axo and Bronze. As the Marvel Universe adapts to the challenges of a post-Krakoa world, Melee's combination of stealth, defense, and raw determination positions her as a key player in the evolving landscape of mutant heroes.
The mutant Toad has been a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and by extension a part of the mutant community for a hot minute, but in my opinion, Mortimer Toynbee hasn't really been utilized as much as he should be given his massive list of abilities. Toad has a degree of superhuman strength, specifically in his back and legs, which allows the little weirdo to jump around 25 to 37 feet, and he'll kick you so hard that you are never getting back up again. He's got flexible bone structure, superhuman stamina, durability, reflexes, and agility. Toad, like a lot of super beings, has a regenerative healing factor, but unlike a lot of mutants, he has UV vision, a super strong 30-foot prehensile tongue, acidic saliva, sticky paralytic resin out of his pores, and pheromone secretion. I can understand why he isn't exactly at the top of the mutant landscape, partially because he's kind of really gross and just overall unpleasant, but he does have a hell of a lot of abilities to offer. The X-Force member known as Shatterstar, a lot like Toad, just has a huge list of abilities that just keeps getting added to. Gavidra 7 learned the arts of battle as a warrior in arenas on Mojo World, where he developed both a sense of honor and incredible fighting skill, but those aren't his abilities. He possesses a large superhero starter pack: superhuman strength, speed, agility, stamina, durability, senses, reflexes, agility, dexterity, coordination, balance, plus a regenerative healing factor and even enhanced learning ability. Now curiously, he actually has hollow bones as well, which makes him lighter than you would think, but also further boosts up his natural physical skills. Now the cool part of Shatterstar are his Mojo-verse swords, which he can use with his mutant ability to channel powerful vibratory shockwaves, which can be absolutely devastating but also drains him of energy. But also, after his mojo time, he can now create X-shaped portals that have to be linked to another person who acts as an anchor for said portals, if that makes any sense. These also drain him, and he has a cooldown of about like 4 days before he can do it again, because this powerhouse needs some kind of balancing of some sort. Next up is Sage. Sage is basically a super genius, with a brain more powerful than any computer in the world, granting her perfect memory and rapid analytical abilities. She can come up with the perfect plan in an instant, learn just about any skill without having to practice, remember everything she's ever experienced, perform multiple tasks at once by allocating a partition of her brain to each task, and, thanks to training with Professor X, she can engage in telepathy. Her telepathic abilities allow her to detect minds and read them, project thoughts, astral projection, cast realistic mental illusions, and she even has a kind of psionic defense unique to her called her firewall. But it doesn't even stop there, as Sage even has some biokinetic abilities as well, including reading another mutant or person's genetic code and DNA, being able to literally see who someone's related to, jump-starting latent or enhancing current mutant abilities, and she has complete control over her physical body, being able to expel nanobots from her body by controlling her immune system. Almost like highly advanced antivirus. She needs more time in the spotlight, that's all I'm saying. Next up is Wolfsbane. Rain Sinclair has the mutant ability that I kinda wish I had when I was a wee little lad. She can turn herself into a wolf at will, and can even go into a transitional form that is basically as close to a werewolf without being a werewolf as you can get. In fact, she is basically a werewolf, but with none of the drawbacks of being that kind of monster. She retains all her faculties minus not being able to talk and just being a little tiny bit feral, and is not forced to change only at nighttime. Rain grows much larger than her human form when she changes, and gains access to some enhanced strength, a healing factor, and enhanced vision, which coupled with the body of a wolf grants her enhanced speed and reflexes as well. But then she got a secondary mutation, and it's a weird one. After becoming an agent of New Tien in X-Men Blue number 9, she gained the ability to somehow transform into a pack of 5 wolves, and on top of that, her general wolfy-like characteristics, like claws and teeth and all that jazz, also became stronger and sharper on top of that. Paige Guthrie is part of a family that has a lineage of mutant abilities. Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, Joshua Guthrie, Icarus, Melody Guthrie, Arrow, and Jebediah Guthrie are all part of her family. Paige's power is a wee bit unorthodox though. She has the ability to shed her skin, and by concentrating on specific chemical or elemental formulas, she can cause the layer of skin underneath to be a different element or shape or state. With that power, she's been able to have skin made of metal, diamond, granite, wood, rubber, glass, and one time she even managed to basically turn into a lizard, which should be a secondary ability all by its own. Husk has always had troubles with her powers, such as not being able to morph multiple times without intense pain. However, in Generation X, it got a little bit worse when Paige started suffering from dramatic mood swings and patchwork morphs. It was then revealed later that her secondary mutation also causes her to change personalities every time she morphs, and that can cause her to act out or even black out. And last but not least, as the daughter of Magneto, Polaris actually has pretty much exactly the same abilities as him. She can control and manipulate magnetic fields, allowing her to create force fields, fly on the Earth's magnetic field, emit magnetic concussive pulses that can overload and short circuit electrical systems, and so much more. But there was a very short period of time where she gained a power we have never seen from her father. When the villainess Zaladane stripped Lorna of her powers, leaving her completely vulnerable, the jolt of losing said powers forced Polaris' latent secondary mutation to evolve. Polaris was now able to absorb negative emotional energy to transform into a virtual powerhouse. She grew in height and gained super strength, durability, and invulnerability. Basically, Polaris can Hulk out. Now, after regaining her magnetic powers, Lorna lost her Hulk-like abilities, but it is still technically something that she could do until the Scarlet Witch caused M-Day, which got rid of the ability altogether.